One of the biggest things that I've been seeing, and not just in recent times, but for the last year or two, more than that really, is this overemphasis on eating not just lots of fat. Because I'll tell you what, my appetite is pretty good at regulating how much fat that I need from my food when it's not butter or something that is a dairy derivative. That was what my main point was going to be, which is there are people that are eating sticks of butter a day, which look, if you're not having any problems, you keep doing that. That's fine. Like go ahead. But I can only eat fat like straight animal fat whenever it's in the form of butter. And people, this is very interesting because people will often say, well, dairy's addicting because of the casomorphins in it. And I do believe that that's true. However, what does butter not have hardly at all in there? Beta casomorphins or casomorphins because it's usually from the breakdown of casein that you will get these casomorphins, and casein is a protein. And how much protein is really in butter?
Yeah.
And so there's more elements of dairy that are addictive that don't just come down to the the morphine element of it. And I think that that's a big problem as well. People, this was interesting. So I talked to Coach Steven, and I know that you're very familiar with Coach Steven. You do videos with him quite frequently. Where he said something that I've also thought when it comes to weight gain. So this is one of the common things that has been talked about recently is the weight gain, but also weight loss stalling. So maybe not to the degree that they're gaining weight back or something like that, but they're just there's a plateau. Now, number one,
fatty acids.
yeah. Well, so that's something that he brought up as well. But also, first of all, we have to get out of the way that sometimes a plateau doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. Okay, that sometimes that happens. Many times that happens. The first bit of weight that you lose can happen very quickly. The last bit, not so much. I know people personally that are like this. 55 pounds lost, and there's like 5 or 10 pounds that just stays on for a year. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean to start eating hundreds of grams of carbs a day. Okay, let's not go that far. But the other thing that I am seeing is people, and it makes sense. I mean, it's understandable, but low metabolic rate as a result of undereating. I see this a lot, actually. Undereating is very easy to do on a carnivore diet if you're not used to eating that much animal protein. You're not used to eating that type of diet, is undereating. And
100%.
yeah, and I've noticed in myself as well. If I've ever thought to myself, maybe I'm undereating, a bit because I start developing problems. Like I start getting really cold in a 70-degree household or something like that. Like, it's like Fahrenheit for any international
Yeah,
viewers. Yeah, not Celsius. But what I've noticed is that I can get down a lot more protein, for example, like double the amount of protein if I'm not eating minced meat. That's also something. You want to talk about ancestral consistency. When we ate an animal, we didn't grab every single part of the animal and grind it all up and then have it and I'm not denigrating people that eat minced meat. Like if you do well with that, that's fine. In fact, that's primarily, given my circumstances, that is primarily what I eat, but I'm aware of that. And I know that if I find that I'm developing symptoms that seem to point in the direction of me under eating, I don't eat ground beef anymore. I eat something else, So that's another thing. I said it one time as sort of a like offhand comment, like, oh yeah, by the way, I seem to just undereat if I'm eating ground beef and stuff. And I got loads of comments saying, oh, I actually didn't put two and two together. I do the exact same thing. Like I can't get that much food down if I'm eating ground beef. And I go, well, maybe there's something there. So what are your thoughts on that too? So yeah, overeating fat in the form of like butter and stuff like that. And also undereating food in general can also be a problem. What are your thoughts on that? Have you ever seen that before? And then what are your solutions for people that may actually be developing those problems that doesn't include, eating maple syrup every day or something like that?
Yeah, 100%. Look, in regards to things like the butter, for example, I mean, again, we mentioned the odd chain fatty acids. Now, things like butter and cheese and dairy in general contain higher levels of this, but in a normal circumstances, the fatty acids will break down into acetyl-CoA, which will enter the citric acid cycle, and we'll utilize these as ATP, or will store or whatever, or it'll go through to ketone production.
Right.
But the issue with
Yeah.
the odd chain fatty acids is that because there's an odd chain left, this breaks down into propionyl CoA, which needs to be converted into succinyl CoA. And it can go through a number of processes. And one of these is essentially a fat storage process. So when from a caloric perspective, which, I don't need to explain to you, a calorie doesn't really exist in the context that we believe it to. But when you consume more of the cream or the milk, the dairy or whatever, we're more likely to store that fat because of this odd chain fatty acid. So if we can gravitate away from, and this is exactly what I do when I want to gain weight. So when I was bodybuilding, for example, and I was going through a bulking phase, I would eat more of the double cream and the butter and the cheese. And cheese worked very well for me for a very, very long time because it's a fantastic source of protein and fat. It's super convenient. And I found it an incredible tool for many, many years, but I had to remove it eventually because of the high levels of the calcium. Now, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, actually, but calcium, critically important. It's one of 6 compounds that makes up quite literally every cell within the body, so it's very important. But calcium, I believe, in excess, particularly from a supplement form, is damaging. If we look as nature intended at meat and muscle meat, organ meats, for example, it predominates potassium, which is 4 times higher than sodium. Then it drops right down to magnesium and calcium, which sit at roughly an equal ratio. And these are used in the cell as such. And if we overconsume calcium, calcium is excitatory to the muscle. So calcium can cause things like twitching and cramping. And what we tend to do is add the magnesium to offset, which can work. But the key to this for me is removing or reducing the calcium. So a carnivore diet, we tend to consume lots of eggs. And eggs are fantastic, incredibly nutrient-dense. If you can get on with them, brilliant. But for me, they've started to cause issues from these excitatory pathways in the brain, which I'm susceptible to migraine. So I've noticed that the cheese and the eggs are contributing to migraine. So I've had to remove these. Again, this is something that has occurred, further down my journey. So I've removed them now. I've removed the butter. But that for me is critically important. For somebody new to this, cook in your butter, cook in tallow, lard, ghee, do all of these things, but eat the cheese, eat the eggs, but be mindful that as you gravitate deeper towards the journey, maybe look at swapping the butter from your cooking to tallow, or even beef dripping, or use the fat from the animal itself. We don't need to add lots of fat to coffee, which I've been guilty of doing. I used to make what we know as bulletproof coffee, adding butter and MCT. I still add MCT. As you know, I make C8 MCT oil and powder by certification, the world's highest purity. I've got some in there. I use it several times throughout the day. And I don't use it for any other purpose other than the benefits of increasing keto production and breaching the blood-brain barrier, because C8 will instantly convert into ketones, whether you were ketogenic or not. It's not storing. It doesn't elicit the bile response. It's sent directly to the liver via the hepatic portal vein. So I don't add butter, but I will use C8 and exogenous ketones. But beyond that, I don't add in any of these compounds. So if you are stalling, then the first thing, and from a keto perspective, this is more likely to be the keto-friendly vegetables, things like bell peppers, tomatoes, things that are high in lectins, which are, because they're low carb, we believe them to be okay. And they are. They're okay in the initial phases, and that's fine. But as you gravitate deeper in the journey, when you plateau, as you say, that may be fine. You may be plateauing because that's where your body wants to be. And I think it's important to maintain that for several weeks before you try to break through that lower limit again. But if you find that you have excess fat and you are ready to break through that plateau, then remove the bell peppers, remove the tomatoes, remove the compounds that are deemed to be keto-friendly, that are higher in lectins, because the lectins will bind to insulin receptors and they will still signal the body to store 5 times more fat than that elicitation and action of insulin alone. So lectins, which are found in nuts and seeds, by the way. So even things that are very, very low carb, very high in lectin. Also, Nuts and seeds don't contain omega-3s. Contrary to popular belief, they contain ALA.
ALA, yes.
ALA. We need EPA and DHA, and that conversion
is very, very low.
If anything at all.
It's in the single percentage points. Yeah, it's like 3% I've seen.
Yeah,
it's
at the
really
highest.
low. Yeah.
You know, so we're not going to obtain enough omega-3s from this. And what we are going to obtain also is lots of cyanogenic glycoside or cyanide, hydrocyanic acid. Things like flax seeds, for example, very, very high in cyanogenic glycoside. At the lower end, it's 14 milligrams per 100 grams. At the top end, it's something like 40, which basically means at the highest level, and based on, I think, at a 70 kilogram male, it's 0.5 milligrams per kilogram is at the lower end, which can cause death. So yes, it's right at the lower end. Highly unlikely, but still possible.